one of my moderators is a clicker aficionado to the point where he owns like I think it's like the top 8 games on Steam all have like 5,000 plus hours and they're all different clickers.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he has like
full on.
a good number of them playing concurrently usually.
He's a clicker sommelier.
Yes, no, he could like I've joked that he should start like a fan site about clickers or something. You know what people shouldn't start a fan site for, though, is the Halcyon Frequency Podcast. This is episode 47, I think, airing December 11th, 2022. My name's Blind, and I'm back and I'm hosting. Is this episode number correct, Jess?
I don't know. I was going to say not to make a fan site.
Well, maybe make a fan site. I don't know. We already have a website, which is one that you can go to already, so why not just go there instead? And Bloody Drongo is also here. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. I also don't have a fan site.
How about a fan wiki? Can we get that? That'd be pretty cool.
A fan wiki full of Drongo lore. All of the best shoe-based drinking misadventures all in one place.
I think there actually is a Halcyon Frequency wiki, though. I think somebody did make that once a while ago.
Is that really a thing?
I think that exists.
Fascinating.
I think it's on Fandom, though, so does it really count?
I don't even know what that is.
It's a really crappy free wiki hosting service that just bought like every single website in the internet. They own like I think they own Giant Bomb now too. Like they own like everything.
Giant Bomb.
Do you not know what Giant Bomb is?
No. I don't know.
Oh, Giant Bomb is a website that Okay, so on a podcast, I'm talking about one of the biggest video game podcasts. That's the thing. So Giant Bomb is they were a bunch of people that either got let go or quit GameSpot around the same time. They formed a website in 2007, and instead of focusing directly on written content like all websites at the time, they focused on video content and live stream content and streamed on their own website. And they had, I think it's still the most popular gaming podcast on like all gaming podcast platforms, which is the Giant Bombcast. But at this point, none of the original staff are still there, and they all have their own Patreons now. So I still listen to all of them, except like in different platforms, except for the co-founder who unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. But yeah, it's one of the biggest video game wikis, and they have a podcast with like over 1,000 episodes probably at this point.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
Jeez.
I had no idea. I don't have really any chops. I don't have any class when it comes to video games and video game history and the surrounding media around it.
Yeah, this is video games news media history, so it's about as legitimate as you want it to be, really. I don't know. I was a big fan of them for a very, 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 very long time until recent years where things got a little rocky and they got bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold and a bunch of people quit. So when that happened, I kind of stopped listening. But I listened to their podcasts from about 2008 until about mid 2020.
Wow, so you were listening to podcasts before they were cool.
I've been listening to, I've been obsessed with video games before I was able to actually play most video games.
When did podcasts get cool?
I don't know. Like it is possibly just when I was just like, oh, podcasts are a thing. I don't think they kind of came onto my radar until like, I want to say like 2016, 2017, but that's likely just me, honestly, living under a rock.
The first time I heard about podcasts was a friend of mine. I think it was in Scouts actually. And the reason we were talking about podcasts was because it was at the time DJ podcasts were blowing up, and like people like Armin van Buuren and like and DJ Tiesto all had podcasts, like these big like trance guys from Europe. And their podcasts were just like it was like an hour-long radio show. So it was just like a song mixed into another song, 2 seconds of talking about what the last 3 songs were. And then it was just like a DJ set basically, right? Yeah. And this was like at a time where getting music for free on the internet was difficult and music was expensive and podcasts were free. They had ads in them usually, but they were free. So it was a really easy way for kids to like get music. So we download them and then like put them into VLC Media Player, or not VLC, like an Audacity equivalent, and cut them up and put them onto our MP3 players and like have music, because like, we were looking for ways of getting music for free. So that's how I found podcasts originally. And then like over time, like pretty quickly, by about 2009, when I was like just getting out, like after I was off of dial-up internet and onto high-speed internet, I was just downloading podcasts because it was a way of getting free entertainment for when my parents shut the internet off at night.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
this is why I'm the podcast junkie who talks about podcasts all the time, because I'm just like that. I'm the perfect era of millennial, I guess, that like I just collided with them as they were created. And like back in the day, they were awful because you had to download iTunes and you had to download them within iTunes. So like half the time I'd be like sticking a microphone up to my computer and like recording them off of iTunes until eventually I found out that you could download them directly off of people's websites in most cases. So I just download the MP3s.
See, I think I didn't have an iPod until I was like, I think 18 or so. And I then spent like a couple of years just doing random stuff. And then from like 2012 until like 2016, I was traveling a lot. So I didn't really spend, I mean, I was online, but I wasn't really kind of like ingrained in any kind of like online cultures and kind of going out of my way to discover new things. I was just traveling all the time out of a backpack. Like it was just, yeah. So I have like this big kind of mental gap in terms of my knowledge of the internet where all of this stuff happened and I just was not paying attention.
Wow. Me too.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been offline. Like I had like pre-internet era me where I had friends who had internet and I would go over to their houses and I'd play games on the internet like Muds and RuneScape and like earlier MMOs. Like I remember watching my cousin play EverQuest and StarCraft and being like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." And then like I remember early days of us having internet, which was just like when I was allowed on the internet for like an hour and a half, I would download as many games as possible. And so that's why I ended up playing super old games because they were small. And that's how I found a lot of like the weird like ASCII stuff that I like, is because like they were small. So I could download like 5 of them and like they would hold me over for like 4 days until my parents would let me on the internet again. But once we finally got away from dial-up, because I had dial-up until late or early 07, we didn't get high speed until mid 07. When we got high speed, our high speed was actually slower than our dial-up too. But the difference was,
I think we got rid of dial-up in 2009.
The difference was though, I could be on the internet when my mom had phone calls, so I wasn't limited to specific times of the day.
Oh man, yeah.
I feel like we got rid of dial-up though in like 2000.
Yeah, most of the people I knew got rid of dial-up in like 94.
Yeah, you got to remember that. I mean, I grew up in like country Australia, so it's like our internet infrastructure was never the best out here to begin with. So it was like everything kind of happened like 10 years after everybody else had it happen to them, you know?
So out of curiosity, when you say like country, like how far from like the nearest town with like people in it? Like how far from the nearest place where you can buy groceries?
In a town with people in it. It's a town of about 40,000 people. It's the biggest town for probably about 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
Probably 4 hours. 4 hours, because the nearest big town or big city is Sydney, which is 4 hours away.
Gotcha. Okay, because like where I grew up was like, if you got in a car, we were about 30 minutes from like the grocery store, and I kind of lived in like what was referred to as kind of the boonies, like kind of the middle of nowhere. But like for me to get to the nearest house that had a kid my age that lived in it was an hour and a half long bike ride.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but like I could get on a bus and 30 minutes later be in town, and it was a town of like 70,000 people or so, which was then like a 20-minute bus ride from Vancouver. So it was like we were kind of on the outskirts of a suburb of Vancouver, sort of, or a small town that would get mad at you if they called you we called them a suburb. But yeah,
100%.
the area that the only claim to fame that the area that I grew up in is Linus Tech Tips named his server after it.
Well, okay.
Which
there you go.
A very like specific reference, but I feel like I've just been hogging this whole podcast so far.
No, you're fine.
Well,
I want to hear more about Jess, your blind spot of internet history.
Oh, I don't think it stops at internet history. I just have like a huge blind spot for like all things, actually. I don't know how I've accomplished this. I I have just managed to live my life so thoroughly under a rock that like most references just go right over my head. It is like absolutely a meme in my channel. It's like shock. People are shocked if I catch a reference. Like movies, TV shows. I don't know what people's names are, like famous people, like games, memes. I'd have no all the things.
Yeah. I'm notoriously bad at pop culture, like actor names and movie names and stuff like that. I could have well seen the movie. I could well, if I looked at the picture of an actor, go, oh yeah, I've seen them do something. But I could not name them or be like, oh yeah, I've seen this movie and this movie. Oh, that has such and such in it. Like that ability for people to be like, oh yeah, you know, I watched such and such and it had, you know, John McDonald in it, and it had, you know, Bob. And Bob was really funny this time, you know. Like that has always been like something that just I don't have the capacity for. Apparently, I just don't. I don't absorb that information.
Me neither. But I mean, I also don't try to.
No, neither. It doesn't interest me. Like I don't have the capacity to be interested in that for some reason.
I'm not uninterested in it. I
have an incredible capacity to remember things that I'm interested in. But if I don't care, then yeah, it's never gonna stick.
I think I just have a really poor recollection of things in general. Even stuff that I care about, I will quite easily just forget stuff, which is, I don't know, probably to my detriment.
I just think it's because I am a hipster at heart, and so everything that's cool, I have to reject it. That's what I'm going to go with.
Oh, games aren't cool.
Games aren't cool. They were in my school. But no, I haven't, rejected gaming and whatnot. It's just, I don't read the news, I guess. I mean, like I do, but I don't sit down and open up like IGN. Like, what did IGN say today? I'm like amazed that people do that. Like when we post news articles and stuff in the private Discord, like you do this, like you just sit down and read things.
But believe it or not, for me, usually it's I listen to somebody talking about it on another podcast and then go, that's interesting. And then I sit down and look up the original article, pause the podcast, read the article, and then go back to listening to the podcast and do whatever else I was doing.
So this is a problem that I have too. I also can't listen to podcasts very easily at all because I just can't sit down and be focused on them. Like I have a goal to listen to all these episodes for our podcast. This one here that we're recording now, because I'm very behind. If I'm not on the episode, I can't sit down and do it. I'm telling you all my dark secrets.
I personally do not just ever sit down to listen specifically to a podcast. It's always something that I'll have on while I'm doing something else. So I might even be playing a game or something like Worm Online, where I don't really need to have like all of my attention being devoted to the podcast. I'm still having my mind occupied by something else, but I've still got bandwidth to kind of process what's going on. Or I could be like driving. Like those are the main times that I'll actually listen to a podcast. Like I don't think I've ever sat down and gone, right, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to enjoy this podcast like that. That's kind of weird to me.
I really struggle with that because I think it's the ADHD though. It's one or the other. Like if I'm doing one thing, that's it. It will just go in one ear and out the other. Even driving. So like when I was in college, I did listen to a podcast because it was part of our course material. And I listened to it in the car and I would have to go back, and it was infuriating. Even though I was just like on autopilot driving, I would just zone out and realize, wow, I didn't listen to 5 minutes of what was just said.
It's always terrifying when you're driving in a car, right? And you're just like, come to like after 20 minutes and you're just like, I have not been paying attention this whole time. How am I still alive? What is going on? How did I get here? Or is that just
that's all just like muscle memory, you know? Your brain knows what to do. The brain knows the process.
It's just on autopilot.
Yeah, like a Tesla.
Well, I think I'm going to put this podcast on autopilot. And we're going to take a real quick break. And when we return from this break, we are going to be talking about the game that we've been playing this week.
Yes.
Game singular?
Yeah.
Only one?
Technically there is plural. There is two. There is a second game that someone else played. But we're going to be talking about game and other game back right after this.
Hi, I am Sui. I'm not in the current episode that you are watching at the moment, but I would just like to say check out my stream. I play a large variety of games, mostly like indie wholesome games that are super fun. So yeah, if you'd like to check that out, make sure you do so. Anyway, back to the show.
And we're back with this episode of the Halcyon Frequency Podcast, episode 47. And Drongo, you've got an update to your previous gameplay talks about Warhammer 40,000's Fat Sharks exclusive Dark Tide stabby, hacky, shooty, gamey thingy.
Yeah, I mean, I played it quite a bit more since I talked about it last time, and really the only kind of minor kind of additional thing that I wanted to comment on was, I think last time I did mention just how absolutely gorgeous the environments and level buildings were and how thematically impressive they were. Having played a little bit more now, I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed in the lack of mission variety within those maps. Even though all of the maps are absolutely S tier in my opinion, there's just not enough of them. And I've found myself kind of going into missions and it feeling a little bit repetitive, which I think is just a minor note of disappointment in what could have otherwise been like absolutely, you know, this is a fantastic experience and they've done a great job. Not to take away from that, but I just wish there was a little bit more, you know.
So I've been watching Dark Tide, and I played Vermintide 1 a while ago, and it didn't really grab me. Like, I played the missions all once and was just kind of done. And like, so like talking about variety, like what is like, have you played their previous games out of curiosity?
Yeah, I have played both of the previous Vermintide games. I have to say I did not love either of the previous Vermintide games. Like, there was nothing I inherently disliked about them. They just were never a game that I was like, oh man, I'm having so much fun, I can't wait to play this again. There was just something intangible missing from them that just prevented me from going back.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. I mean, I've watched a good amount of it, and I almost wonder if I kind of get the feeling that they've made that game so many times now that they're kind of running out of ideas to a degree. Like it seems like a lot of big room stab thing, and like they're trying to make a replayable like loot game out of that, right? And like, how much can you really do with that format? Like to a degree, it's like I wonder if people have just played enough of those games now at this point, because like I've heard like this exact comment from a few people now. And I wonder if people have just played enough of this type of game that it like, I think like the flash of the pan of like Vermintide 2 and I guess like also to a degree Left 4 Dead 2. In games that have come post Left 4 Dead 2, there's always like this problem of like, oh, there's not quite enough variety, or it's like, oh man, I could just go play the other one that had more variety. And it's like, I'm hearing that a lot about Dark Tide, and I think that that's kind of unfortunate, but I hope that it's something that they're able to remedy over time.
Yeah, I think honestly, like, in terms of this style of format game, I would say it's the best version of this style of game that I've played in a very, very, very long time. Like the combat it feels very, very satisfying. The gunplay feels very satisfying. There's a really good variety and really well thought out variety between the different characters, and they all bring something unique to the table. And I would say that's probably the main selling point in terms of what differentiates itself from the rest of the kind of the genre of Left 4 Dead style games. But I do think, you know, when you I think I've played somewhere between the region of like 15 to 20 hours now of Darktide, and during that time I think I've played maybe 4 or 5 maps, 4 maps in total. They have slightly different layouts sometimes, but it is still the same map, and even though they are really good, you know, 20 hours is a long time to spend on the exact same map. And I mean, even if you look at games and compare it to something like Left 4 Dead 2, for example, you had, I forget how many levels exactly, but each of the levels then had different stages within them that all had their own unique pathing and level design and everything like that. So you had already a much bigger design, and that's something like variety in levels. That's something that Darktide lacks, unfortunately, at least at the moment. It is definitely something that is within their power to remedy. It's whether or not they're going to want to put that same level of investment into making new maps. I hope they do.
Yeah, hopefully they get there. But while we're on the kind of Warhammer 40,000 flavoring here, you got the chance to play some Rogue Trader, Owlcat's CRPG. So
I did.
Curious about this one.
Yeah, so Rogue Trader has just come out as an alpha. So I've got a key of that. I've played a little bit of it now. So it is a CRPG. So just a real classic role-playing game. And as far as I know, this is probably one of the first / most modern classic RPG setting games that has been set in the 40k universe, which I am totally here for. Like, I've always enjoyed the idea of playing you know, some kind of continuous RPG game tabletop, like a Necromunda or the actual Rogue Trader game, but I've never had the you know, the ability to actually play it with friends or anything like that. So this gives me a unique opportunity to actually kind of delve into that universe in an RPG setting, and I'm really excited for it. It's still early alpha. There are definitely some problems with it, but for me, this is something that was absolutely up my alley, and I'm very, very happy with it so far.
That's good to hear. So Owlcat's games in the past have had notorious issues with kind of late game balance, and the game's just falling apart at the seams as they get further and further along in their games. And I remember watching one of the most recent Pathfinder games, and Bellinaire, our teammate, playing it, and he had this build that had not only completely broken the visuals of the game, because he had this self-replicating dragon thing that was clipping through itself as it walked around, but also was running incredibly poorly and just crumbling at the seams. So considering this is a closed alpha that you've got access to, how does it feel in its current state? Do you think that do you think it's on a good path to be getting to release in a way that will feel good and look good and not just fall apart, or are you just too early to tell?
I think it's a little bit too early to tell for me. I also have to say I haven't played Owlcat's previous titles. I think if I had to, you know, visually speaking, in terms of how it runs and how it feels, probably the closest comparison I could draw is probably say Divinity Original Sin 2 is kind of the aesthetic and feel of the overall game in terms of how it kind of flows. That's what it reminds me of, even though it is an entirely different setting. And that's a plus for me, because I absolutely adore the Divinity Original Sin games. So yeah, I'll report back once I played some more and as the alpha progresses, but you know, I'm cautiously optimistic, I think. But again, I am definitely the exact target audience for this style of game. So I'm definitely going to be probably unfairly positive to a fault with that in mind.
No, totally. But also, like, this is a closed alpha for a pretty unfinished game, and also like, you know, and like you said, you're the target audience, and this is like preview style coverage, right? So it's just like poke. It's like, how does it feel? Like, do you think it's gonna fall apart at the seams, or does it feel good? Like combat wise, what's the combat style in this one? Out of curiosity.
So it is like turn based, kind of.
Okay.
If you think of like XCOM style turn based, that's probably the best analogy that I can give.
Okay. Okay, I get
given
you.
that it's a fairly ranged, universe setting with lots of firearms.
Yeah, I was curious because like the past few Owlcat games have had like this. Well, I mean, admittedly, they've been Pathfinder games, right? So they've had like the real time, like it plays out in a timeline style combat, but they've also had like the real time pause stuff with like pseudo turn based stuff, which is odd but also interesting. So I was just kind of curious as to which direction they were going with that. But that sounds neat. Yeah, no, looking forward to hearing more about that as that develops. But we've got this like massive wall of video game on this list of stuff to talk about, and me and Drongo have been talking a lot recently. So Jess, talk to me about Dwarf Fortress.
I can do that. But no, okay, I'll talk about Dwarf Fortress. I was gonna say, but I have something else I wanted to talk about.
Oh, then talk about the thing you want to talk about. Then that's fine.
It's completely derailing this whole segment.
Do it.
Okay.
Derail it.
So while you guys were talking about Warhammer, and I was just like, how many Warhammer games are there? I started thinking about like what problem I have. What is my issue, with reading things? And I realized, when I was a kid, I loved gaming magazines. I think my issue is that when I go on the internet, I get distracted too easily. And so if I like sit down, I'm like, I'm going to read something, just boom, distracted. Do you remember like old gaming magazines?
Oh yeah.
Those were amazing. I loved reading those.
I never actually got one. My parents were very anti-video games, and they still are. So I always would covet my friends' video game magazines when I would go over to their house. I'm like, oh my god, there's this world where you've got all these things that happen, and oh my god, there's all this information here. Oh, that's so cool. It was always mind blowing to me. They were very cool.
I can't imagine like not being allowed to play games. I was like 8 years old with Grand Theft Auto 3.
I never had subscriptions to gaming magazines, but the library had a big stack of PC Mag and a big stack of Nintendo Power, which I would take out. My mom would be like, go get books. And I'd come back with like 15 copies of Nintendo Power and like a bunch of PC Gaming Mag and video games. I think it was called Video Games and Entertainment was another one. Or maybe it was called like Electronic Computers and Entertainment or something. Anyway, there was something in entertainment, and then there was Edge magazine was another one that I would get at the library. I would just like get these like big like old gaming magazines. A Eurogamer was another one.
Yeah, I miss magazines. I would read those. It's not that I don't want to read things. It's like I think I just get too distracted like by all the stimulus on the internet. It's too easy. ADHD checking in again.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of checking in again, time to check in with Dwarf Fortress. So, Jess, talk to me about Dwarf Fortress.
Are you sure? Because, I could derail this again, but okay. Actually, speaking of rails, I actually was watching your minecart tutorial and was like, this makes no sense. Well, without playing it. So I was like, I'm going to come back to this later.
I realized I was screwing something up after today's stream and had to go consult the wiki. So I
have been very eager for the Dwarf Fortress team release, which is I guess you call it the premium release with a GUI, a graphical user interface. And I am not disappointed. I almost wish that I had tried before because the 3 days that I've played now have just been like, this is awesome. But whenever I looked at the ASCII version, it was just like my eyes would glaze over and my brain would just start exploding, you know?
Yeah, I like I said earlier in this, like I got into ASCII stuff pretty early, so it was never the
Yeah.
ASCII that scared me away. I mean, the first time I actually played Dwarf Fortress was in about 2009 when I was finding all of those games. But even I back in the day bounced off it. Like I started and I was like, I'll just go back to playing whatever other game I was playing at the time. Like usually it was ADOM or some variant of Angband. But those games aside, like it took me a very long time, and the reason I didn't ever stream it sooner was I just assumed nobody would watch it. I was like every other streamer on Earth back in before this version came out, and even before this version was announced, like I just was kind of under the opinion, like nobody's gonna want to watch it. And my chat just started pestering me in like 2018. They're like, "Do it.
Hey,
we know that you've been
Dwarf
trying
Fortress.
to learn this. We know that you've been learning this off." Because like every now and again, I would post a screenshot on Twitter of like something I was doing in Dwarf Fortress, and people would be like, "So when are you gonna stream that?" And I'd always be like, "Probably never."
Well, let me tell you.
And then somebody, I can't even remember what it was. Like I think like it was like post RimWorld release or something. Like RimWorld had released, and my channel had gotten partnered and had like that massive crash that a lot of channels get after getting partnered. And my view counts had tanked, and I was basically just kind of accepting that my streaming career was going to end in the next like 6 months. And so I just started streaming Dwarf Fortress all the time because I was like, well, I want to learn this game, and so this is my
the
opportunity to
irony
learn
of
it.
the whole thing.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna learn this game in like the end of 2018, beginning 2019, and chat can help me do it properly. Like, I know enough to like build a small base, but like not a small fort, but like not enough to actually play the game competently. And like, I'd post my stream on the subreddit, and I have 30, 40 viewers, and like Halcyon frequency was getting going, but I was basically like accepting the fact that my stream was going to perish. Like I was just accepting my fate, and nobody raids Dwarf Fortress streamers. And then something happened. They announced the premium edition in like like spring 2019, after I'd been streaming the game for like 8 months or whatever.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, it was. They didn't start working on it until 2020, but yeah, they announced it in 2019.
Oh my gosh, where's the time going?
They actually apparently signed the paperwork to get the whole project going in beginning of 2018 and started discussing it in 2017.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's been in the works for a while. But like, yeah, no, I started streaming it back then, and just like that gave the channel enough of a bump that I was able to survive that really crappy summer, and then it just slowly trickled up after that.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I first played Dwarf Fortress about 9 or 10 years ago, and I sat down after, I think a friend of mine, Dilsey, he told me some stories about Dwarf Fortress. I'm like, man, that sounds really cool. And he's like, yeah, you should learn it. I've been following this guide, and he sent me through this like Word doc, which was basically like a step-by-step guide on how to kind of set up your fortress, and it had a couple of screenshots in it. And so I basically spent, and it was like about 20 to 30 pages long. And so I basically spent probably the best part of like 2 weeks just going through page by page, trying to follow this Word guide that I'd printed off. And I did kind of okay learning it. And I had some reasonable success. I don't remember exactly how well it went, but I don't remember it being a complete disaster. But the disaster happened when, after that 2-week period of me sitting down and being like, right, I'm going to learn how to play this game, and then putting it down, I think for about a month or so, maybe a little bit longer, and then coming back to the game and being like, right, I'm going to play this. I remember how this works. And then loading it up and going, I remember how nothing works. And then picking up this guide that I had again and going, yeah, you know what? I can't be bothered. And then I put it back down again until the Steam release. And I've also been having a simply wonderful time. The game is so much more accessible now. And there's definitely moments where it's like, yeah, this is still an old, really janky game under the hood, but it is so much better than it was. And I'm really pleased.
I have to say, I admire young Drongo's perseverance in trying to learn. I imagine if I had been in your shoes, I would not have gotten nearly as far.
I mean, I tried to do it without any guides or anything because like I didn't like reading when I first tried, and for me it was like I would download the game, I would open it up, I would generate a world, I would start playing, and I would last for about 20-30 minutes usually until I just get frustrated and Alt F4, and then I would think about it a bunch, and then I would like try again, and it like lasted for like it was like this weird year process where like I would get a little bit further every time and eventually give up and just delete the game. And then I would, 6 months later, I'd read an article about it, or I'd see a post on a forum about it, or someone would mention it, and I'd try it again. And then it would snap back again, and I'd give up again. And then, like, I think Total Biscuit mentioned it a bunch of times on the Co-optional podcast, like, ages ago, and I'm like, oh, man, I should try that game again. That thing was neat, and then I'd try it, and then I just hit a wall, and I'd be like, nah, I give up again. But, like... Even when I was trying to learn it on stream in 2018, I was trying to do it in concert with RimWorld too, and like other games. I was trying to play. I was still doing Roller Coaster Tycoon stuff sometimes. I was still playing and other things, and like I was trying to play other games around. I had one day a week. It was Fridays. I was doing Dwarf Fort, and it was like 6 weeks of that. And I eventually was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna play Dwarf Fort. And I think I played Dwarf Fort for like 3 months straight. Like I just there was a point where just like my brain snapped, and I was just like, I'm just going to play this game now. And if my channel dies, so be it. And I just started playing. And like the only thing that kept my channel afloat was this stream team and like my own, like, I don't know, stupidity, I guess. And just like determination, just learning to play this game. Because I couldn't think about anything else. It got to a point where I was like, I can't think about anything but this game.
That's been me since Tuesday.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Okay, so on Tuesday, I loaded the game up, and like the first thing I do, usually I spend like an hour just chatting with my my community and stuff. And so like 30 minutes in, I'm like, I'm just gonna put this tutorial on in the background, and it was your very first Let's Play tutorial, and got like halfway through it, or at least to the part where you like generate characters, and I was like, nope, we're doing it. We're just gonna start. And the whole stream was just like butting my head into a wall. Like, what is happening in this game? What is this? What are all these things in the menu? This is so different from RimWorld. And so like I ended up like getting a headache, and like all night I had a headache, and I was like, I think this is a Dwarf Fortress headache. I think my brain literally melted. And so I went to bed on Tuesday, woke up, and I was like, okay, no, I feel much better. And I was like super excited to get into it. And like it started clicking on Tuesday. And I was still in my tutorial for it. So we just messed around, tried out a bunch of stuff. And yes, if you've seen my VODs or like saw me playing it, I made like a huge mistake with my staircases, and it just kind of became a thing, the Grand Stairlands and everything.
The Great Stairlands.
Yeah.
Can you regale us with the story of the Great Stairlands? Because I just love a good Dwarf Fortress story.
Okay,
I'd love to hear it.
The way that I thought it worked, just because I hadn't like watched a tutorial on how to do stairs, I was thinking that like when you placed your like stair blueprint, where you started your cursor, that would be like your first step. And where you ended it would be the bottom step to your whatever layer you were trying to drop it on. And it would make like incremental steps down. Kind of like a ramp. And then I realized, oh no, that's not the case. But so I was playing the tutorial, and the tutorial locked out the eraser tool until much further in. So I'm sitting here like, I have a bajillion staircases and I can't delete them. And so like my dwarves just made all of them. And so I ended up with...
Wait. So why did you place so many staircases? I don't understand.
Because I thought I was I was trying to make a grand staircase, like down into my hall. So I wanted it to be like this big, wide, grandiose staircase. Instead, it ended up being like a 20 by maybe like 30, I don't know, like so many stairs.
Oh, that is too funny. I love that. I mean, I had a stair related incident last night, actually, trying to work out how stairs went. So I've actually, I've gone out of my way not to watch any guides because I wanted to come at the game from the perspective of, is this now actually a more intuitive version of the game? And does the in-game tutorial and guides, are they enough information to let you actually play the game? And the answer to that is kind of. And there is parts that are definitely lacking out of it. But it's much, much better than it was before. But I was trying to remove some staircases so I could replace them with a different material. And I had multiple occasions where my dwarves would remove the staircase that they needed to get back up onto the layer above them, because apparently that's how that works. Yep. And then you're just left with an opening that goes down that doesn't get removed either. It's just a hole that goes down to the bottom layer. So you just have to build floors over it and pretend it doesn't exist anymore. So after entombing several dwarves, we managed to work out how that mechanic worked. It was good.
Well, that's why I ended up leaving the stairs, because, I asked chat, like, can I get rid of the stairs? Yeah. Okay, well, will there just be a hole there? Yes. Jess, there will just be holes. You have to put floors down. And I was like, so I'm just going to be like out in the forest with all these trees and then like floors. And it didn't make any sense, so I just left them.
Very fair.
For me, the process of going from, the old cumbersome classic game to premium was, I got key the Friday before the game came out. I was one of like a single digit lucky people who got it early. And when I got it on the Friday, I was just sitting there, and it was at the first 5 hours, which I recorded most of it and I've deleted most of the footage now because it wasn't really usable. But like the first 4 hours was the biggest test of my own patience that I think I've ever encountered.
I was wondering how that would have gone for you.
I know what every menu in the game does. Like whenever I find it, I know what the menu does. The problem is finding it. And I went into the tutorial and made it to the point where I realized that, they're locking off stuff. So I literally Alt F4'd the game. Went to save manager and just closed the whole game, restarted the thing, started without the tutorial, and started playing, and it was fine because like I watched all the preview footage, like I had a pretty good idea of the way the game was going to work, but like none of the hotkeys worked. For some reason, the mouse wheel is inverted by default. All of like the UI is actually like weirdly similar to the way it was. Like all of the workshop UI is actually very like it's in a different place now. It's like kind of centered in the middle of the screen instead of on the right side of the screen. But like the buttons are all like in almost the same place as they were in the old ASCII grids. And so when I like got into workshops and stuff, things were super easy. But there's a few screens I still haven't found. Like there's a few screens that I know exist, and people have told me they exist in this version of the game that I can't find. And it's like knowing everything that I knew going into it is, and by the time that like 5 hours of like extraordinary frustration was over, of just like I have this incredible opportunity to like record a ton of stuff and get stuff up on day one, and I can't bungle this. I need to pull this off. I need to do this right. There was a point where I just kind of realized, this is the exact same video game that I'm playing. Like nothing has changed, except like obviously there's some changes because it's a new patch and like some stuff has been moved around and some events are different, and like the way certain things interact with the player is different, and like not, like the vast majority of it is the same game. Once I kind of came to that conclusion and I realized like where half of the menus are, and like one of the most frustrating ones for me was like there used to be 3 different delete buttons. There was like delete designation, delete planning, Q delete to delete buildings, and also the delete constructed items button, which were all different buttons. 3 of them are on one button now, and the other one is the mouse button. And it's like, and then there's the eraser tool, which is kind of new, but also not new. And it's, I was trying to figure out how to delete a building the first day, and I actually had to like DM one of the Reddit mods, ClinoDev. I was like, who I knew was in the beta. I was like, where is this button? Like, just where is this button? And he sends me a screenshot of it. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. I had to ask the dev team where it was too.
Oh no!
Like, there was like just this, and it's the stairs button with the little crossy on it. And him and me had a back and forth about it. We were talking about it. It's like, man, that's terrible. They need to make that easier to find. He goes, oh, don't worry. No, anybody who's never played the game before isn't gonna have a problem with it. And I was like,
well,
right.
I mean,
to a degree, probably.
I definitely did have problems with that, and I think the big problem that I had was with that button wasn't necessarily finding it, because the little tooltip that when you mouse over it tells you what it affects, but it's when you actually use it, there's no kind of feedback that tells you you've used it on a thing. So I was sitting there going, oh, it's not working, and trying to, I think it was removing walls or something, and I was like, it's not removing it. It doesn't do anything. There's no visual feedback that I've now ordered this wall to be deconstructed. Like, how you would have an area that's designated for mining, and you have a little icon that comes up, and you've elected that area to mine, but there's nothing that comes up. And I'm just like, after like 10-15 minutes of going, why is this not working? This button says this should do this. Why does it not work? And chat's like, oh, we don't know. It's like, it should work, right? And then it turns out it was working the whole time. I just didn't have any visual feedback that it was working. I just kind of gave up and was like, I'll press play, and then somebody came along and removed the wall.
So the thing is, it does have a visual feedback, but not until you unpause the game. And the button,
okay.
and it's one of those buttons where you usually pause when you're going to go do something like that, right? Like just instinctively. And so it does put a little X on the building, but it doesn't tell you that until you unpause the game, because the game has to tick forward for the graphic piece to appear. But like, what's even better is if you have keyboard control turned on, which I did have turned on initially because of like muscle memory, right? And there is a keyboard cursor that you can use to like build and stuff. When I had that turned on initially, there is none whatsoever if you have the keyboard. There was a bug where like if you have the keyboard cursor turned on or something, like that doesn't pop up even when you unpause.
Oh.
So like I think like that has been fixed as of this point. Like I tested it last night and it happens now. So either I just didn't notice it or like it wasn't there in the first place. I'm convinced it wasn't there. It's like stuff like that. Like I don't know. It's still held together with staples, zap straps, and duct tape and chewing gum, but like I guess the impression that I'm getting from the two of you is that it is approachable enough at this point.
Yeah, I think because I've played a lot of games like Rimworld, that I've kind of built up an understanding of, how to actually play the game in terms of managing it, and how to set up work orders, for example. That was something that was, setting up the conditions where that would trigger is something that I have, brought over my experience in Rimworld, and like, okay, well, if it meets these particular criteria, then we'll make this, and then it'll be it'll be fine. That all makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, there's definitely little things here and there, like I said earlier, that you can just you still know it's the same thing under the hood, and it's still a bit janky, but it is just approachable enough that it's and just friendly enough and visually friendly enough that I'm interested and I'm engaged. And I think also from a viewership perspective as well, there are people that haven't played Dwarf Fortress before but are now interested in it, because you're no longer looking at, when you first tune in, you're no longer looking at just a wall of ASCII and being like, I don't know what's going on here, and I'm not going to stick around to find out. Now it actually makes sense to people visually from a viewership perspective as well, which is great.
Yeah, it's like it's no longer the visuals of it. The thing that I've been saying about Dwarf Fortress for literal years at this point is the game isn't hard. It's obtuse. It's just now it's significantly less obtuse. It's still obtuse, but it's significantly less obtuse. Previously, it's like it was difficult to learn because of the barrier of learning what you're looking at.
Yeah. I think as well, the main thing that I'm really impressed with is just how good the soundtrack is. It is absolutely glorious. I love it. I absolutely
It's a great
the
soundtrack.
menu music even is, I was just sitting there, and I've spent the last 2 streams just sitting in the main menu, listening to the music, chatting with people before jumping into the game for like, I don't know, like half an hour at least, because it's just like, this is a vibe.
Yeah. So do you know the story behind the soundtrack?
I don't know.
Well, so apologies if I get some dates wrong to anybody listening, but so the original soundtrack for Dwarf Fortress is like a 6-minute loop, and it's Tarn recording into a webcam microphone on his laptop, doodling on his guitar. So programmer of the game doodling into his guitar. And then there's the intro music, which is like a very short, like dun, dun, kind of like loop as well, which is just a little MIDI thing. And that's all the game was for years. And it's a weirdly good little loop. Like you can hear like audible static from the crappy recording quality. You can hear like all kinds of things, but it gives the game kind of a vibe, right? That loop, that melody that he plays is the main menu music for Dwarf Fortress now.
That's great. I love that.
That's cool.
But it's been remastered by somebody named Chef Dabu, who works for a company called Co-op, who made a game called Nog and several other games, and has been a composer in the industry for a little bit now. Alongside of another composer named Simon Schwerer, who I'm convinced I butcher the name of every time I say, who wrote a soundtrack called Songs for Dwarf Fortress in about between 2009 and 2012. Which was considered a fan soundtrack, and they're a recording artist from South Africa. And they put together this collection of like about 15 songs for Dwarf Fortress, all themed after events and things in the game, using the actual Dwarven language to sing it and everything. And a lot of those songs were things like Kogan's Son, which directly translates to Boat Murdered, which is one of the most legendary Dwarf Fortress playthroughs, which is I think actually the song that plays when you lose in Dwarf Fortress, like you're in the game now, which is Kogan's Son. Basically, it's like this very somber, almost dirge-like sound.
I've not lost yet, so I look forward to hearing it.
But like there's a lot of the tracks in the game are remastered versions of that free soundtrack. So if you want like more prototype, less professional, but also equally as catchy versions of some of the songs, you should go listen to the soundtrack as well, because it's also very good. So it's that plus a third composer who I can't remember the name of, unfortunately. And the three of them kind of came together and apparently was just like harangued by a few of the like Kit Fox was pestered by one of the forum mods who is Klenodev. To bring on Simon to get him to record it. Apparently, allegedly, originally he refused because he didn't want to take Zach and Tarn's money. But they were like, no, it's Kit Fox paying for this. It's not Zach and Tarn paying. It's Kit Fox. So he agreed and came on and helped remaster the soundtrack, as well as write some new songs for it. Like the drinking industry, the banger that plays in the taverns sometimes is that's a brand new song. So a lot of them are new songs, but some of them are also like remastered version of old fan music.
That's super cool.
That's great. I love that they've pulled on that, that history of the game and the original kind of vibe and stayed true to that. That's wonderful. Yeah,
it's something that I think is kind of like just absolutely awesome. I think that Kit Fox kind of killed it, really. But like, I never really expected it to do as well as it's doing. I knew that it would do well, right? Like there's a subreddit with like 125,000 people in it, which is growing by like 1,000 people a day right now. That has existed for the game for ages. And, it wasn't the most active subreddit. It was kind of like a sleeper subreddit. Every now and again, something would blow up on there and it'd get really big. But like generally, it was a pretty chill subreddit, not super, super busy, but like busy enough. So like the game's had like a really big following, and it's always kind of like I didn't expect it would take off as quickly as it has. I'll say that. But I'm really happy for everybody at Kit Fox. Like, I think that they've done the community good with this thing, and they've made a really good version of a very strange game.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised how quickly it's blowing up, to be honest, because it is much more accessible now. I think that it would be a very difficult game to get into if you had never played a colony sim or a management sim before. Because definitely, like Drongo was saying, my RimWorld knowledge and my knowledge of other games that have been, derived from the RimWorld formula have totally made it much easier to get into. And I don't know that I could otherwise. But it's just so much more approachable with the graphics. The sounds are good. And really, like, my favorite thing about it is that it's so sandboxy. I love it. I love that you can just, like, kind of live your life, and the game isn't slowly making a list of your deeds, whether they're noble or nefarious, and calculating and storing points and trying to decide what to do next. Help or hinder, and you can just live. It's great.
Yeah.
It's so appealing.
Or you could have a fort like mine where you get a little bit too ambitious with your first fort attempt on stream and then get mauled to death by giant chinchillas, only to find out that it was actually a bug that got patched on the second day, because apparently fishing was... So there's a new mechanic that's been added, which is agitation, and it's specific to the Untamed Wilds biomes, and apparently also the Wilderness biomes, but I haven't seen it too much in the Wilderness biomes. It's specific to the Untamed Wilds biomes, and the Untamed Wilds agitation mechanic is essentially just if you're building and building and building, all of the cavern layers have this mechanic, but specifically Untamed Wilds have it on the surface. If you're building and building and building, the wildlife will just start to attack you after a little bit. And they'll come in, not in waves necessarily, but the ones that are wandering through the area, if there's too much constructed stuff on the map, too much value worth of constructed stuff on the map, they'll attack you, right? Specifically like the big variants and the big mean ones, right? Which isn't too dissimilar to the way the evil biomes work with like zombies and stuff, where they'll just kind of slowly circle in and eventually attack you. But they're big fleshy things that can be cooked. So they're not as bad because you do get like a benefit from them if you can hunt them, but they're brutal. And apparently they got a couple extra zeros put onto just fishing. And I was doing almost nothing on the surface, but I was fishing. And so my entire fortress of like 15 dwarves or whatever just got swarmed by, I want to say, like 12 giant chinchillas or something that, they're the size of a large bear. And it's like, these things just came running in and just mauled my dwarves. I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'm not playing in an Untamed Wilds biome now. Those are too hard. And then the next day I see a patch note. It's like, so we fixed fishing to stop breaking Untamed Wilds biomes. It's like, God damn it.
Death by cute fuzzy murder thing.
I like that it was chinchillas and not like something actually means, so that I could laugh at it.
Yeah. I did have a flock of giant Kias come down and
oh no,
and steal everything just about from the visiting trader during my first I guess autumn. Coming into winter, and it's the game tutorials like, buy some food from the trader, and I scuffed the trading, and they wouldn't trade with me anymore, and then the birds stole everything they had anyway, so I was just like, well, guess I'm gonna forage for some food since I can't buy any.
Yeah, Kias are notoriously hated amongst Dwarf Fortress players.
I haven't had anything bad like that happen, except one of my dwarves had a strange mood came upon him, and chat was like, "Oh, yay, strange mood!" And I was just like, "I don't know what's happening." And so like the fey mood, the strange mood, they fall into it, and then they go and gather materials. They claim a bench, and they make something. Or so I thought. I thought that this dwarf had everything he needed. He did not, and so by the time I like got the jewels set up for him and started cutting some gems, he was just like, "Nope, I'm in a state of melancholy," which apparently means that he's going to commit suicide, and it's like really terrible. You can't stop it from happening.
Yeah, it's a damn shame that.
I'm just like, where's the hotline? This is terrible.
Oh no.
Just drop a brick on his head. He'll be fine.
Oh,
I don't even know what happened to begin with. No one explained to me like what the strange mood is. Just that when they fall into it, you must give them access to everything they need, or they'll go and die.
Yeah.
Just like what?
Oh.
At least he went melancholic and not berserk.
Yeah, that's kind of the fear that I had, was because I was like, I had heard stories about people being possessed, and that was what has happened to me. I think I've had 3 possessions now.
So they're who were they possessed by?
Well,
I don't know.
So there's varying types of strange mood. I can just like explain all this to you if you want, but
Yeah.
there's varying types of strange moods. So there's fey moods, there's possessions, there's fel. There's the one other one which is positive. So there's the positive moods are like fey moods and strange mood, just normal strange moods, and those ones they get skills out of it. So the item that they complete, the type of item that they complete is their that becomes their talent. They become legendary in that talenting. So let's just say it's a metalsmith and they claim the metalsmith's workshop and they make a sword, right? Let's say they make it out of bones, leather, iron, and a gem, right? They make a sword, then they'll become a legendary weaponsmith. If it's a possession, then it's supposedly a past dwarf that didn't create their artifact possessing them from the afterlife, and they're creating their past artifact, and they don't gain any skills from it. It's that past dwarf who's dead or whatever people's headcanon is. And then there's fel moods, which is when they go into a mood, but they're also the lowest level of depressed, which is like the really angry face. And they have the little mad head thing above them, at which point they go grab another dwarf, stab them to death immediately, snap their neck, and make them into an artifact.
What?
Is real good when it's just like, oh great, you made a thong out of a dwarf. How did you even do that? But like, or like you made a chair out of that dwarf, or you made a crown out of that dwarf, or you made a sword out of that dwarf, or whatever.
Amazing.
And so essentially what it is when they're making the artifact, if you select the actual the workshop that they've claimed, or actually if they're just wandering around, if they go into a strange mood and they're wandering around, look at what their highest skill is, and that's usually the one that they want. Build that workshop if you haven't already built it, and then they'll claim it. And then once they've claimed it, if they just sit there, you can select the workshop and it'll blink through what they're muttering. They're muttering or they're scribbling or they're either drawing pictures, muttering, or saying something. And they usually cycle through the approximation of what they need. So it'll be like bars shining, which usually means like metal bars, or like gems shining, or gems rough, or is scratching pictures of a forest. So they want trees, or like they stacks of cloth, or varying things. Or sometimes they'll be very specific and they'll be like cloth yarn. The higher the value of your fortress, usually the more items they want because they have more stuff accessible to them. And so it's sometimes they draw from their personal likes and dislikes. They don't always do that. There's a lot of like different conditions and stuff that can cause them to go for different things. But it's really just kind of a matter of having stuff available. Like I very rarely fail them. It's quite funny seeing people who have developed metas around not fully understanding how the mechanics works, and that's one of the reasons why you'll see people who just like have workshops all in their own separate rooms with doors on either end, because like if they don't immediately go and grab stuff, they just lock them in the room and let them die. Which is like, okay, sure, but like if you're aware of how the mechanics works, it's not that difficult to just make sure that you have one of everything available at most times, and then they'll be able to just get what they need and you'll get the cool artifact.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad that there's the work orders where you can just say, okay, well, as long as I leave X amount of raw material here in case we need it, then that's, what I'm happy with.
But like I failed a few yesterday or two actually, because I kept on having dwarves want glass, and I had no sand on my map, and we were besieged, and I had no traders, and so I couldn't buy sand to get glass. So without sand on your map, you're just kind of SOL. So like, always have a few sandbags around. Always have like some yarn cloth, some silk cloth, and some plant cloth, like have at least 2 logs, have 1 metal bar kind of.
I just feel so bad for Garrett, Like I clicked on his workbench. I clicked on his workbench and Garrett was, scribbling about gems drawing pictures of gems, and I was like, oh, okay, he needs gems. We get the workshop up, and like right then he's like, I'm super depressed, melancholy. She's like, oh no, but I had these for you, like literally seconds.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I've had that happen too.
Poor
One of my most memorable strange moods I had was I had this. I was building a fort in the cavern layers. This was long time ago, years ago now. Building a fort in the cavern layers, and I had a dwarf that wanted I think it was a metal bar, and I had no metal yet, and I hadn't even set up forges or anything, so I had no metalworking industry. I was like, oh god, like this dwarf wants metal. So I threw like a forge together, and I'm putting stuff together real quickly. And like I wasn't as good at the game at this point, so it was a much more slower process. I was like, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to melt this down so I can make this thing. And I got him the metal bar, and dwarf I think his name was Dastot. He just runs over to the workshop, picks it up, runs back, get the notification that he's starting his artifact. I'm like, yes, we got it. And a troll vaults over my wall on the edge of the thing, smashes the workshop, and the dwarf goes berserk and kills the troll. And then like
just
got
random troll
mauled to death by all my dwarves. Well, because like I had a 1-layer high wall in the caverns, and trolls can climb walls pretty effectively. And I just like climbed up the side of the wall, jumped into the fort, and just just top, because they're building topplers, so they can topple stuff. And he just toppled the workbench, and the dwarf just like freaked out and just strangled this troll to death. And then like went crazy and tried to kill all my dwarves too. But like one of the most memorable like failures I think I've ever had.
That's amazing.
But yeah, no, honestly, like it's just it's hard to explain, I think, why Dwarf Fortress is cool unless other people have played it. And I can't fully explain how frustrating it's been the last 4.5 years of streaming this game and just being told time and time again by people going, nah, it's too much work. It's like, but there's so much here.
Well, I think that's like one of the things, and I think that's one of the reasons why it has kind of taken off, is that there's a lot of people like me that are interested in the game, that love like hearing about and reading the stories. Like I love the story about like the cats that would die of alcohol poisoning in the inn because they were licking their paws, and like boat murdered and all of that stuff. Like even though I hadn't played the game in like 9 years, I was still interested in it. I would still, come across like Reddit articles or like stories online and other people who were actually playing the game and listen to their stories and be like, oh yeah, this sounds really cool. I love that. And then knowing that I really did not want to play it. I feel like there's a lot of people that are like me that are like, man, this game is cool, but it is not for me right now. But this is like the time where it's like, okay, now I can immerse myself in this world, which is why it's taking off, because it's like, it's not so much more people are just discovering it now. It's like all these people likely heard about Dwarf Fortress and have been interested in it, but now it's like, okay, this is now palatable to my brain where I can get along with it.
It was just inaccessible for one reason or another.
I have a question since you mentioned cats dying in taverns. Have I told either of you the story about when babies mind controlled their mothers to death?
No.
I feel like yes, that does ring a bell actually.
Not for me.
If Jess hasn't heard it, I'll tell it real quick. There was a bug in the last major release, not this one, but like the one before, which was 47.0.5. I think at the time it was 47.0. No, it was like 4.1 or something. The last major release had a bug where they changed how mounts worked. So like enemies can have mounts, right? And there's a whole nother mode to Dwarf Fortress, which nobody, I guess, who has this version has played yet, which is adventure mode. And they added mounts to adventure mode. And so essentially you can mount horses, you can ride elephants, you can ride giant cougars, you can ride giant anything or whatever. You can ride a giant chinchilla, I guess, and go maul a bunch of dwarves to death. You can tame animals and ride them, essentially. And in order to do this, they had to change the way the AI worked. So the way they did it previously was the code was set up so that the creature that was underneath, so the mount itself, was the one driving. And then the one on top was just along for the ride. Was the way it was initially. But they changed it in that version so that it flips. So the person on top could drive, so the player could be on a mount. which was fine for all of the invading AI, because instead of like if you say you're getting attacked by an army of goblins that are riding on beak dogs, which is their most common mount, then when they're coming towards you, it's just the goblins driving, so it's fine. Instead of the beak dogs driving, they all have the same goal, which is kill all the dwarves, so that's not an issue. And you know, in adventure mode, it was totally fine. But when mothers have babies, the first year the baby can't walk. They can crawl, so they lie on the ground and they crawl around, but they have no AI, so they will just walk away from food and starve to death. So the issue was, when they swapped the AI, mothers would carry their babies. So the mothers previously were driving, but now that the baby was, according to the game, mounted on the mother, the baby was driving. So
yes, I see where this is going.
So there was a period where having a baby was an instant death sentence, because it was just a curse to just wander in circles until you starved to death, because you'd starve to death in 3 months. And it took a year for the babies to grow up. So when moms had babies, we had very brief, like, almost like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like lockdowns for them, where we would put them into alert zones where they were left on a stockpile full of food.
Baby alert, baby alert.
So we would just basically lock the mothers in a room with the babies on their heads, just like zombifyingly walking around, hoping that they'd walk over the barrel that had alcohol in it when they got thirsty.
Oh my gosh.
Otherwise, mom would just die. And like, there's just these mothers like thirsty and hungry, just like crawling around with these babies on top. Anyway, after some hysterical laughter and a lot of dead forts, I got patched out in about 5 days. But
just 5 days.
Yeah, about 5 days. There was a lot of ha 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 ha. That's very funny in the patch notes, but yeah, it's funny because like there was some crashes in the initial version, like on day one, but from what I can tell, a lot of it has been fixed now. And the thing that's funny to me about it is like there's nothing crazy, like there's nothing super like I think maybe like the fishing thing with the agitation stuff is the only like wacky thing that's kind of happened, but even that's like you kind of expect to die in Dwarf Fortress, so very few people like really realized that it was a bug, except for like more advanced players, right? But like for the majority of people, like there really wasn't, I think, a lot of game breaking things aside from crashes, which is normal, and Tarn and Zach are generally pretty good at finding those, locking them down, and getting them patched out. But there isn't anything like stupid like that, and I think that just signifies this is actually a really well put together release for Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, I for one am like very excited to play more. I've wanted to play all day, but I haven't because I need to get other stuff done, and I just know if I open it up, it's going to be an all-day thing. Like last night I opened the game and got to the menu and then I closed it. I was like, no, I won't go to bed till like 3 a.m. if I start this now. So I guess I'll just wait.
That's exactly how I've been feeling all week. Like I've only played Dwarf Fortress while on stream this week because I was like, I've got other things that I actually need to get done. So I'm going to control myself. But you know what what I'm going to do when I finish this podcast, because it's the only work-related thing that I need to do today, is I'm going to play some Dwarf Fortress.
Nice.
And I'm going to play it real long.
Yeah.
Are you recording anything, or are you just playing it for you?
No, this is just for me.
Nice. Perfect.
Yeah,
Sounds like a good a date with yourself and some dwarves.
Yeah.
Make sure you bring beer.
I just it's been really fun watching other people learn it, and also like even for me, like today I was messing around with stuff that like I know how it works, or knew how it worked, I guess, in the older versions of the game. Minecarts, right? I knew how they worked, but the way they worked previously was like, if you wanted to build a minecart track, it was, I think at most 16, like I think at the most tiles you could do at once was 16. And it was like you had to select the direction that the track would go, and there was no visual indication or difference between the different directions of the track. Like, I mean, it was like equal signs or like up, down signs, but like there was no, you could sort of see the corners, but not really. And it was like north-south track. Okay, up this far. North-south track. Okay, up this far. Okay, north-east track. Okay, we're turning. Now like east-west track. Okay, we're still turning. Now west track. And like then you do have to do like east, west, up, ramp, and stuff like that. And so I knew how they worked, but they were so bloody tedious that there's no way in hell I would ever actually like build them, because they were just, I'd be fiddling with it for an hour and then they wouldn't work. And that would may just work for the worst stream content and was just more effort than I was willing to put into it. And it's like, I know that there's incredible things you can do with minecarts. You know, like in Portal, speedy thing go in, speedy thing come out.
Mm-hmm.
Put heavy speedy thing in, put heavy thing into minecart, push minecart down big hill, hit it into thing where stuff will fly out of it and stuff will go flying. And if that's a minecart filled with 150 short swords, you bet anything that minecart hits is going to explode into 1,000 pieces. And it is phenomenal, some of the dumb things that you can do with minecarts in Dwarf Fortress. Like if you have a minecart that goes down a hill and it goes through a trench with lava in it, it fills up with lava. Okay, so you go down a big hill, it goes through the trench with lava in it, and it hits a fortification. And then lava sprays everywhere, and you're like, now we're cooking with magnets. And that's like just some of the stuff that you can do with minecarts. So even I'm like sitting here like agitated and excited going, oh my God, I get to go actually mess around with these mechanics that theoretically I understand how they work, but I just couldn't be asked to because it was just too much effort. So like it's even like affecting me in a way. Like I'm sitting here going like, man, I just want to keep playing that that I was playing earlier today. But like also at the same time, I'm just so happy to see other people feeling that way too, I guess.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But is there anything else that we kind of want to say to close up this big old wall of Dwarf Fort talk? I guess.
No, I think I'm ready to move on.
I want to say,
Okay.
It's awesome. Go try it.
2 thumbs up.
Maybe 3.
3 thumbs up. Okay, we'll have to find a 3rd thumb somewhere. It's okay. I'm sure I chopped one off somewhere. It's probably in a refuse pile. All right, well, we're going to go to a real quick break, and when we come back from that, we're going to be doing a little bit of a recap of trailers from the Game Awards. I'm sure that'll be fun. And right after this.
Well, hi there, I'm FG, and you can find me over on twitch.tv/FG², Mondays through Fridays at 9 a.m. BST, which is 4 a.m. Eastern, 1 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Central European Time, and we play loads of different games, indie games, AAA games, things you have heard of, things you haven't heard of. It is also not my birthday, this is not a cult, and elephants are pretty cool animals. If you want to know what the heck that means, come and find out. See you on Twitch.
All right, everybody, we are back, and this is once again episode 47 of the Halcyon Frequency Podcast, and we're gonna do like a little bit of a kind of a recap of the Game Awards. Jeff Keighley's meme-tastic adventure that happens once a year, where they talk about video games and give a bunch of games that probably deserve an award, but maybe not all of the awards to all the big expensive games that are fine. But we're going to be talking through the trailers and games that were announced, because that's kind of, I think, what we care about here in this little group of people on this here podcast. So we're going to kind of wander through the announcements that matter to us. So we're not going to be mentioning everything, but just the stuff that we care about. So I'm going to start off because the first one on this list here on /RPC Gaming's recap is Returnal, which was a PlayStation exclusive, and this is brought to you by Housemarque, a little Finnish developer. And I am keen on this because I don't own a PlayStation, and PlayStations are expensive, so are TVs. And I really wanted to play Returnal when I first saw it. I don't know if this is something I'll stream or if it's just something I'll play on my own time, but I've been listening to the soundtrack for it. I've watched a bunch of it. The visuals in that game are incredible. And, I like run-based action games, and that's what this is. So I would really like to see kind of a AAA budget on a run-based action game, and especially in kind of that... Housemarque has a style. It's very glowy, very colorful, very bullet helly, lots of explosions, and very pretty. So I want to play that because I have a better graphics card now, and I'm looking forward to that one.
Nice.
Should I just like rattle off the next one that I'm interested in because it's the next one on the list?
100% fly into it.
Okay. Atomic Heart has a launch date, which is February 20th, and they have a new trailer out. Atomic Heart is the game that was above Dwarf Fortress on the wish lists on Steam until the day before Dwarf Fortress came out, where Dwarf Fortress passed it. So I guess it's currently, the 13th most wish listed game on Steam. And Atomic Heart is a first-person shooter in kind of a post-apocalyptic Soviet nightmare style, and looks really cool. I mean, up until now, the only stuff in trailers has really been just like some boss fight footage. So not a whole lot, so we have a more expanded trailer now, and it looks really cool. I'm very curious to see what that game actually ends up being. More just fascinated by it than actually playing it necessarily, but curious as heck about that one. Jess, you were interested in Replaced, which I think is coming up next.
Yeah, so that is a 2.5D sci-fi retro futuristic action platformer. It's a mouthful. I was saying earlier, I have no idea like if this is a game that I would actually like to play, but the graphics look amazing. They just look like mind-blowingly stunning, and the trailer just captivated me. And so it's on my wish list now, just because I at least want to experience this art.
Yeah, looking at it, I feel like this is one that like Kiri and FG would complain about motion sickness, because I was watching.
Oh
the
yeah,
trailer
there's some
before
screen
we,
shake.
Like, yeah, there's some screen shake, and there's like some dynamic camera angle stuff going on, especially in the combat, that I think might even make me vomit. But yeah, no, they're doing some things with like particle effects and lighting and depth of field and camera angles, but like also with like that flat pixel art look that just looks rad.
Yeah, it looks stunning. Like I don't know if I'd actually play it, but I just want to watch it be played or something. It's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
Mm.
The next one on here is on the topic of stunning art style, so it fits real well, is Hades 2.
Yeah, Hades 2. So this is the sequel to the original Hades by Supergiant Games, and I'm not totally like read up on Greek lore, but I think you're playing like a different pantheon or something in this one, so you're still like in that universe, but it's just, and you're still like communicating with the gods that the original Hades communicated with, or like the characters in Hades communicated with, but just a different pantheon. And it looks really great, like still nice, smooth slice and dice. I haven't beat Hades,
so
it's too hard.
I've not played it. I've watched lots of it, and I love the soundtrack to it. I enjoy the art style. I've not played it though. This may be my kind of motivation to actually go out and actually play it before the second one comes out. But yeah, it does look good.
So I'm going to be a bad person and have an unpopular opinion here and be super selfish. I am pissed that they're making a sequel to Hades. Like, I verbally cursed out loud when they announced this, when I saw it pop up in this, like, last night when I was going to bed. And the reason is I adore Supergiant Games. I absolutely love Bastion, which is their first game. It's one of my favorite experiences ever, was sitting on the sofa with my ex-girlfriend, just like passing the controller back and forth, like playing through that game. The soundtrack of it, the way it played, it was like a slower action game that wasn't too difficult to play through. It was super chill, had a great story, and wonderful. Everything about it was wonderful. I loved that game. Their second game, which was, for some reason, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but was kind of more of a cyberpunk turn-based thing, or pseudo turn-based real-time action game, which I really enjoyed as well. Played through the entirety of it as well, and also has a gorgeous soundtrack, was super accessible and very playable, and I really, really liked it. Didn't play Pyre when it came out, which was their third game, but played it about a couple years after, also with my ex-girlfriend at the time. And we loved that game as well. The story and writing were incredible. It was almost more of a visual novel than a game, with like some gamey elements to it and some adventure game elements and some point-and-click elements. Super cool, great writing, incredible lore. And then Hades comes out. And it's a fast-paced action game with twitchy controls that I can't discern here from there and literally can't play. because it's so fast and visually complex, and they have an accessibility mode that you can turn on if you want, where every single time you play through it, you get stronger, and it plays more like a linear RPG that way. And I find it really, really boring to play that way, because the result is, instead of me getting to play through a satisfying video game, I have to bash my forehead against the first boss until I just have enough health that it doesn't matter that I'm getting hit by all of the AoE attacks, and then bash my head against the second boss until I'm just strong enough. And it started feeling meaningless and awful, because it's not the type of game that I can physically play. And I'm so sad that I'm not going to get a different Supergiant game. It's just another game that I can't play.
That's fair.
That makes sense.
I'm so bummed by this. I was hoping they'd go to like something that was slower paced and more lore heavy again, but like I never thought that I'd be mad that I'm happy that a studio is successful, but like fuck, like why can't you make something that I can play again? God.
I mean, the Hades is tough, like mechanically, but also visually. It is really hard to follow. I struggle with it. I haven't gotten past the second zone.
It is a tough game, and I want to play it. The only way I would be able to play that is if they literally had like a game that I really like is called Brigador, and it has a setting which is game speed. You can literally like slow the game down and play it in slow motion. I would need a game speed setting to play Hades.
Yeah.
And
I would probably use that as well.
I mean, I don't typically find myself playing games like that are kind of in the, I don't know, like, would you call it a bullet hell sort of genre? I don't know.
Well, it's more of an action. It's like an twitchy action RPG kind of.
Yeah. It's just, I don't typically enjoy them that much, and that's kind of why I've not played Hades myself, because I'm worried that I won't actually like it, and I'll have enjoyed watching it and listening to it more than I'll actually enjoy playing it. It's just not normally the type of game that I indulge in, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll play it, maybe I won't. I'm not sure.
I actually find Hades to be really interesting because I watched some YouTube video about the way that they wrote the script for the game, and it was really, really interesting. So like everything in the game is voice acted, like fully voice acted, and so it has this massive script, and so I really respect the game just for that, like how deep the script goes, and like you as the player don't always come across it. It just depends on like how you encounter things and the choices that you make, you know, like you can encounter the entire script, but playing through the story into the end, like you might not. And so it is really, really kind of impressive. Also, the voice acting is just so good. I love listening to that game just for like the like breathy, like, I don't know, like so good.
Something that I love to point out about Hades and Supergiant Games in general is Greg Kasavin, who's one of the founders of Supergiant Games, was a games journalist at GameSpot before he co-founded that studio and went off to go make those games, and he does all of the writing on it. So when people talk smack about games journalists, I'm just like, yeah, well, you need to realize that, like, you know, that Hades that you love, dude reviewed video games before he did that. But yeah. No, it's the writing in their games is genuinely incredible, and it's like largely the core of that team hasn't changed. Like it's still like the same art people. It's the same guy who's done all of their soundtracks, and I'm pretty sure the guy who does the soundtracks also does a lot of voice acting in their games too. But yeah, no, like they're like a genuine gorgeous success story that it's wonderful to see the stuff that they've done. And I'm looking forward to the soundtrack of this, and I'm looking forward to watching other people play it, but just sad I won't be able to play it myself.
Yeah.
The next one here is Judas. I've been talking too much. Jess, do you want to take this one?
Me?
Or Drongo, either or.
Go ahead, Jess.
Okay. Tries to find tabs. I was over here looking at Hades, the voice cast.
Yes. Well, here, I'll take it. So this is from Ghost Games, which is founded by Ken Levine, who famously of Irrational Games, who were with BioShock, essentially. Many of you may remember Bioshock Infinite. One of the level designers, little code junkie named Tynan Sylvester, went on to go make RimWorld afterwards. Ghost Games is the studio that Ken Levine founded after Bioshock Infinite, after they laid everybody off, including Tynan Sylvester. And they've been like doing weird Skunkworks things for ages and like haven't said anything in like 10 years. And then now they announce a game that literally just looks like Bioshock in space, but doesn't look like System Shock. And so I'm kind of mad, but also kind of interested.
I was really hoping that it was going to be a Bioshock prequel.
I mean, it might be. Look at the art style. It might be. It very much might be.
Like the way that the trailer starts, you know, like it's been so long since I played Bioshock. I can't remember what the weapon is called.
Oh God, something morphs. The thing that lets you shoot bees out of your
that.
hand.
So like the you can see in like the camera, it's first person, but like they're like shooting things out of their hands like that. So I was like, oh, this is gonna be, you know, like Rapture before the Rapture in Rapture. Gosh, what is it called?
I can't find the name of it. I'm looking it up, but I don't know. I'm just kind of sad that it just looks like the same thing. I like new things. I don't like repeating the same things. So I'm like less excited about this than I would be if it looked than I would have been if it looked completely different, I think.
Yeah, I feel pretty neutral about this one. Like I have to confess that I've played, 50 minutes of BioShock, and I've not played any of the others.
System Shock is better.
I have heard that. I've also not played it. I don't know. I just, it's just not something that I would normally jump at. But I'm interested to see what it ends up actually being in reality when it gets closer to release.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about Death Stranding 2?
I feel like that's FG's thing.
Yeah,
right.
I don't have anything to
Besides,
say about Death Stranding.
Death Stranding 2 is announced.
I don't really know anything about it.
I like that Norman Reedus leaked this thing like 6 months ago on a podcast where he was just like, yeah, they invited me back to make the second one. Just kind of bluntly like, oh yeah, no, we're working. Somebody asked him, they're like, oh yeah, it was like completely unrelated. It was like a movie podcast or something. They're like, yeah, no, how's the gigs been? He's like, oh, you know, I did the video game stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, how's the video game stuff? He goes, oh yeah, no, it's great. I'm back in the studio. We're working on the second one.
Is Death Stranding the walking simulator game?
Yes.
It's the backpacks and falling down hills.
The backpack
game.
and
gotcha.
babies.
Okay.
With the P bombs. Yep.
Yeah.
And Monster
Okay.
Energy. Yep.
Yeah.
You turn your urine into Monster Energy, which is an actual thing in that game. Baldur's Gate 3 has a release date.
Yay!
Yes, Baldur's Gate 3 has a release date, and I'm
A release window.
I'm cautiously excited about this one. I've been waiting for a long time, and I know a lot of people in the community have been waiting a long time for this game. So I'll be very happy to see when it releases, and hopefully it's everything that we hope it will be.
Well, we have a pretty good idea though, because it is in early access, but I hope it lands well.
I have not touched it. I'm pretty sure that we own it.
Me neither.
But I haven't tried it because I just want to experience it.
Yeah, same. I'm in that boat where I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I want to get the full experience the first time round.
Yep. No, that checks out.
Can't wait.
So I'm excited about this one, and I know that Drongo's excited about this one. But please don't be shit, Warhammer 40,000 Space
How
Marine
are there
2.
so many Warhammer games?
Because the
Because
license costs peanuts.
Yeah. There's
it's
like
popular.
literally 50 million studios that have got the IP to make games for it, so it's a whole thing.
Apparently so.
An indie dev friend of mine was just like, man, I wonder how much it would cost to make a Warhammer game. I just like did some research and came back like 2 hours later. It was like, you know, I looked it up. It would be cheaper it would be cheaper for him to buy the license by himself to make a Warhammer game than it would be for him to get a publishing deal like the cut that Devolver would take from a publishing deal would be worse than the amount of money he would have to spend to buy a license to self-publish a Warhammer game.
Okay, well, I guess that makes sense.
But like, that's kind of nuts. But I played the first one and I loved it. Once, ages ago, it was great. That was a like excellent 8.5 hours or however long that game was. And I don't think I've played a third-person shooter I've enjoyed as much as that since.
Yeah, neither.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a Gears of War clone, but like you're fighting a bajillion orcs with a space marine and a chainsword.
I don't know. I think it's unfair to classify it as a clone because I mean I've played the Gears of War games and it definitely wasn't a cover to cover third person shooter like Gears of War is.
It was the anti-cover third-person shooter because your cover isn't cover. You're a space marine. Run faster and shoulder check a fucker and then stab him in the head.
Look, I think the first game was amazing. It kind of really encapsulated kind of the whole feel and aesthetic incredibly well, and the storyline was not the longest. Like you said, I think about 8 or 9 hours. I think my first playthrough probably took me about 12, but I'm also a big believer in the fact that a game doesn't need to be hundreds of hours of length long to play through. Like 10 hours is fine as long as it's quality and the timing is good, and the pacing of it all works. Then I'm totally okay with it, and the gameplay is fun. And the fact that gameplay in of itself is really, really fun is the reason why I've gone back and I've finished it, I think, 2 more times since. It is just a really solid game, and I love that universe, and I really want the second one to be good. I'm really praying it is. It looks good. It looks good from the trailers. The gameplay trailer that they released for this does look positive. So I'm cautiously, again, optimistic this might be okay.
And it is Saber Interactive working on this, which is a studio that like has put out some really good things and also some kind of middling things, but like I feel like at least recently Saber's been hitting more than it's been missing, and that's I think a pretty good sign on that front, really. So fingers crossed on that one. And then last but not least, I think the last one that we have here to mention is Armored Core 6. Which some of you young children out there might not realize that From Software has made other video games in the past, but this is a From Software mecha franchise. I played older for Armored Core. I couldn't even tell you which ones on friends' consoles back in the day. I also played Chrome Hounds, which was another one that they did, and mostly at my cousin's house. And by played, I mean like I watched my cousin play it and went, ooh, explosions. And then every now and again he'd hand me the controller for a minute and I'd immediately die, and then he'd take it back from me and go back to playing. But it's a really neat series of mecha games that are really flashy and explodey, and I'm excited to I'm probably not gonna play it, but I like mechs, and so I'm just really excited to see every single human on Earth stream a From Software game that isn't a Dark Souls style of action game.
Yeah, I that might be enough to get me in on actually playing it, to be honest, because I've never played a single FromSoft game, so who knows.
Big robots.
Yeah, I mean, this was the game that kind of slipped under my radar until yesterday when I was streaming. I was like, oh, what stood out to people from the Game Awards, and everybody was like, oh yeah, Armored Core. I'm like, Armored Core? I didn't really even pay attention to it. Like it just was just like, I guess my eyes kind of glazed over. But I'm also not kind of the target audience for giant fighting robot mecha stuff as well. Like it's not something that I've got a history of being like super into.
Same.
And I also don't have the gaming pedigree to have played any of the previous games. So I just wasn't really paying attention. But a lot of people seem to be excited about this one.
Yeah. No, it's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, the trailer looks great. I mean, it's very much an animated trailer. There's not really gameplay in there, but they're fast mechs. They're not slow mechs. They're like the dashy kind of booster, kind of jumpy mechs. Not so much the mech warrior where it's like I'm going to walk towards you, and in 5 minutes, I will hit you in the head. It's not the slow Western mechs, which admittedly, that was my stuff when I was little. Like, I loved Mech Warrior. I love Mech Warrior 5 Mercenaries, even though that's like maybe a 7 out of 10 game. I really like the Mech Warrior games, but the more Japan-focused mecha games are definitely much more action-oriented. But still kind of the similar levels of like, I'm going to go in and tweak every single variable about the way this mech works so I can get more boost, or so that I can get more jump height, or so that I can get longer arms, or so that my leg won't explode. And it's very much like a very granular, not management game is the wrong word, but very granular action game about customizing your kit and
that's pretty
building
cool.
your mech. So... curious to see what that ends up looking like in the modern era. But I think that kind of brings us to the end of this here episode of the Halcyon Frequency podcast. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. Jess, who are you and where can people find you on the internet?
Right here, apparently. Also, I realized that we neglected just to introduce me earlier.
I said Jess is here. I don't think I forgot to introduce you at the beginning. I didn't say your full name. I didn't say whoa,
That's
Jess,
me.
But yes, hi,
Yes.
whoa, Jess. Welcome
You
to the
can find me
podcast.
here on the
I hope you had a
podcast.
good-
And on Twitch, whoa_Jess. And on YouTube and Twitter and Discord. And Halcyon Frequency.
Bloody Drongo, who are you and where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me over on Twitter as @TheBloodyDrongo, all one word, and Bloody Drongo, all one word on Twitch.
And I'm Blind. You can find me at BlindIRL on almost everything. Screw Twitter, and you can find me at BLINDIRL at mass.to, which is the Mastodon instance that I live on. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to find more episodes of this podcast, you can find it at halcyonfrequency.com or a organically harvested podcast platform of your choice. And just want to say thank you to Peter Pohl and Paul Mile for the lovely intro and outro music. And if this podcast doesn't get served to you on a podcast platform that you use, please join the Halcyon Frequency Discord and let us know where you would like it to show up. Also, on our Discord, we have a place for you to discuss the podcast, and you can find links to the Discord on our website, halcyonfrequency.com. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. New episodes go live every Sunday, and until next week, don't change that dial. This is Halcyon Frequency, signing off.